We are live. We are live. Welcome to College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Pflugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to our channel. Smash the like button. If you like our content, share the video with your family and your friends. If you want to support this College Football Rebel Outpost channel with a donation, hit the $sign, make a comment, and I will get you super chat as quick as I possibly can. Welcome, everybody. Everybody, welcome on into the studio that sits on the corner of Keith Jackson Parkway and Kurt Gowdy Avenue. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to be a legend with your comments in the chat room, with your phone calls later in the show. Big 12. We are talking Big 12 tonight. You can talk about anything you want to talk about. As always, when it comes to college football, with your super chats, with your phone calls, anything you want to talk about, we'll talk about in the world of college football. The monologue is the Big 12. Tonight, it's about the Big 12. We're going to go through Athlon's coaches anonymously talking about their foes in the Big 12. We did that for some of the Big 10 schools. We'll get back into it next week. But tonight, we're going to be just talking Big 12 here in our monologue. What does Big 12 coaches anonymously say about their foes for the 2024 season. We're going to start off with that. Then we're going to be talking about, is the Big 12 pro private capital? Black Rain, hey Greg, remember I mentioned that Redbird CEO Mark Dowley is a part of the Yormark advisory board. Very interesting, Black Rain. Very interesting conversation that Peek Around the Corner had with somebody inside the BTM and Associates, somebody who works with private capital, not private equity. And, you know, I know a lot of you are probably having a negative feedback, a negative connotation when we're talking about somebody using private capital. Yormark is calling it private equity. I'm just going to go ahead and use the word private capital. There is a difference. I think the world of college football is going to more go into private capital than private equity. I don't know if it is. I don't know if it's going to be a negative thing. I do not know. I know I got a feeling that most of the PATC community is hard set against private capital being used for their athletic department, for their team. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it is going to be a negative thing. Now, a lot of you are saying, oh, Greg, you are so naive. Probably. But I'm not sure. And the conversation that we had today with a certain gentleman that has had conversations with certain people in the Big 12, and we're talking, there's this, most of when we talk about private capital coming into the college football world, we're talking about, is a school going to sign a deal with a private capital investment firm and all that entails. But this might be a bigger story than that. Yes, individual schools might make some deals, but it might be a conference, private capital, private equity deal, a conference-wide deal. And it's a prisoner dilemma. If you don't do it, but somebody else does, the other person that does it might get greater value for using private capital. And now you're left behind. And now 4, 5, 6 years from now, your conference might be devalued because you were left behind when it comes to competition. You couldn't quite compete. Let me give you a crazy scenario. Just let me give you a crazy scenario. Let's say all the power conferences kind of say, we're not interested in this. But we know that Pernetti, the new AAC commissioner, G5 conference, he said that his his conference room, the conference room in the AAC was going to be like a Shark Tank. They were going to go for everything. They were going to look at everything. He was interested in this private capital. What if the AAC makes a deal? Makes a deal to ensure that every team in the AAC gets about $5 million in private capital for the next couple years, just to buttress what they can do to pay for players, and then suddenly the AAC becomes more competitive. They win the G5 playoff spot. Maybe they win a playoff game. Maybe their basketball programs become better. Maybe they start creating more incentive, more supply and demand. Maybe they create a better brand, and maybe they get a better deal down the road that pays for all this. Maybe they catch up with the ACC, perception-wise. A little bit. Or with the Big 12, a little bit. Take that example. Shove it aside. What if the ACC decides to do it and the Big 12 doesn't do it? Or the Big 12 decides to do it and the ACC doesn't do it? Whoever decides to do it, the conference that decides to really go for it, bet on their future with private capital, have a run-in, an avalanche of cash coming in, where now they can ensure themselves that they compete at the highest level and getting the highest, going after, challenging for the highest recruits in basketball and football. Is it worth it? Now, yeah, you're going to have to pay it back. But look, the more that people talk to me about this, the more, I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but I'm starting to believe it's going to happen. Not just by a school, by a whole conference. And it looks like the Big 12 might very well be pro private capital. I've been reading, we're going to go through an article here. We're going to go through an old article. The New York Times, Brett Yormark, when he was first hired. Talking about fast growth, pushing for fast growth. Willing to bet on whatever he's involved with. The NBA, the National Basketball Association, 2/3 of their teams, 2/3 of their franchise has private equity money involved, in ownership involved in those franchises. Minority ownership, but they're heavily involved. They give quick cash infusion. So then the franchise can dial in and get a certain better interest rate on a whatever capital improvement they're trying to do. And then the NBA bets on the fact that the next media deal, they're going to get a whole lot more money, and they're going to be able to easily pay off this 3 to 5 year private equity deal with internal ownership. And again, I'm not a financial guy, but the NBA franchises are doing this over and over and over again. And of course, they're getting a media deal that is going to be way bigger than the previous one. My point is this definitely a bad idea? I know a lot of you think it definitely is. Do not bring that money in. You're just going to have to pay it back with interest. Do not do it. But maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's worth it. It sure seems like, at the very least, at the very least, Brett Yormark is seriously looking at it. And I think we got to look beyond private capital coming in. It may be bigger than individual schools looking at it. Remember Drew Weatherford, the Florida State alumnus, owner of a private capital firm, part owner. Remember he said that his firm has talked to at least up to 50 different athletic directors. He's also talked to, according to him and according to Yahoo Sports, who reported on this, who checked with athletic directors, and they confirmed it because they use athletic directors as their sources for their story. So Yahoo Sports checked it out. Drew Weatherford not only talked to up to 50 athletic directors, he talked to presidents, he talked to commissioners. So this private capital money that's most likely coming into college football, there may be conference-wide deals to ensure that your conference can compete, giving you a larger margin of error, betting on yourself that you can come up with some victories on the court, on the field, on the gridiron, to only increase your value the next time around when it comes to media rights. The value of your conferences, the value of your sponsorship deals. Not only that, but these private capitals have great connections with other sponsors. And anyway, we'll get into that. We will get into all of that. I want to thank everybody who's come on in at the beginning of our show. The Georgia Bulldog, Don Scruggs, Marcus Williams is second. Larry, the GM, is third. The Big Lubbock is here. Charlie Atwood, Minnesota Seminoles, Don Scruggs, Thomas is in the house. Mr. LSU Tigers is in the house. John Peterson, the Evil Badger. The Evil Badger, Jeff Olson, is here. Randy Taylor, B. R. Webb, Jonathan Price, Jared Jones, OH, the Buckeye, Kirk Bender, Tracy, FSU, Laurel Rice, the Texas Tech Red Raider, Mr. Bearcat, good evening all. Now, we're going to find out. We're going to find out what an anonymous Big 12 coach said about the Cincinnati Bearcats. We're going to start off our monologue with the Athlon reporting. Anonymous Big 12 coaches talking about each other. Buckle up. Holy smokes. Jonathan Price. Like button. Hit the like button. See John. Mr. Spartan. Mr. Spartan. Steve Austin. What? Holy smokes. I'm going to get that during my monologue. Mr. Spartan is in the house. Coy is in the house. PNW Ute. Pecan. Tony Rodriguez. Lee is here. Don in Kansas. Devil Frog. Dave Bauer is in the house. PATC Private Equity is now ready to lend money to the PATC fridge. You don't need to lend me money to the PATC fridge. You just need to, land a steak, mashed, a baked potato. That is the money that we deal with in the PATC fridge. DP is in the house. Vox Quindaro is in the house. Rock Chalk Flugarians. Congo is here. Matt Higgins is here. Christopher Shannon. John Peterson, private capital expects consistent returns on investment. Focus will be profitability, not the sports themselves, and maybe even winning might happen anyway, but interesting dynamics. Dark Moon is here. Holy smokes. Thomas, mobsters never left. They just reorganized. Holy smokes. Morris Simmons is in the house. LFG is here. Steel Austin. Holy smokes. Cat's Claw 44. What up? The Buckshot Kid is back. Humble. Bumble. Duck. Movie Time Blues. Can't fault the Big 12 for pursuing new avenues. The Grateful Trojan is here. Randy Taylor, Bob Swanger, Coy is here. Nick Kelso. Holy smokes. Holy smokes. Okay, let's get to it. First of all, we're going to have some fun. We're going to have some fun, and then we'll get into the kind of the dry content of private capital, but I think this is a good night. Sunday night, before things start to explode during the week. And let me show you something. Just one example of what we're heading into this week. You remember Leon County? You remember when the second court case, the Attorney General Moody of the state of Florida filed a suit against the ACC, wanting to make sure that her office, that they can get the 160 plus pages of the ESPN ACC media agreement. Part of the suit is that she wants that ACC ESPN media agreement to become open and public view. And then recently here, late last week, Big 12, ACC, Big 10, SEC, they all locked arms together. Remember that? And they filed a pleading that's basically said, all of us support the idea that the ESPN trade secrets, that the media agreement should stay sealed. We agree with our ACC brothers. Well, if you look, there was an email sent to Judge Dempsey. Now, Judge Dempsey, I'm sorry that I cannot pop this up any bigger for you to look at. But Judge Dempsey, not Judge Cooper. Judge Cooper is the one who is residing over ACC versus Florida State. Judge Dempsey is the one who is residing over Attorney General Moody versus ACC. Okay? On Friday, email was sent to Judge Dempsey's office. Service of Court Document. 2024 Office of the Attorney General versus the Atlantic Coast Conference with one attachment. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Spoke to a couple people. I think we're going to know what that email says. Some sort of response. I believe so. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Maybe that comes out in the open Monday or Tuesday this week. June is going to be a month of big time action. So buckle up, brace for impact in Leon County. And then in July, I think we're going to get some action no later than July 12th in Pickens County Remember that story. Clemson wants a partial summary judgment on their first cause, which was basically, in their first amended complaint, was basically is, give us a ruling. Give us a ruling. Does Clemson own their own media rights the moment we are no longer a member of the ACC conference per the ACC ESPN media agreement read along with the ACC grant of rights? So we've got some big stuff coming up in the next couple months. So buckle up, brace for impact. Let's have some fun first here. Let's have some fun. Everybody relax for a moment. Hold on now. This is not working. This is not working. Okay. Am I buffering at all, guys? Am I buffering? Am I okay? If I'm okay, put Y. If I'm not okay, put N in the chat room. Does it look okay to you guys? Is it audio, visual? Are we okay? Yes, buffering. Yes? Are you saying yes, we're buffering, or no? Okay. Yes, we're okay. Okay. It looks like we're going to have some problems. I'm getting an error signal, so we might be getting some buffering here. I think it's going to come and go, so I do apologize. I do apologize for that if it comes and goes. There is nothing more that I can do to make it work better. We got a bad, all right, we're going to try to fight through it. We're going to try to fight through it. Okay, here we go. Arizona. Big 12 coaches talk anonymously about conference foes for 2024. I'm going to give you my comments when I read these. Put down your comments in the chat room or go through them. Super Chat always has highest priority. Arizona. It's hard to think of a better roster for a first-time P4 head coach. Brett Brennan is a proven winner at a program where it really was hard to sustain winning. There's a lot of negative talk about Arizona with the athletic department's financial issues. And that is certainly something you want to see fixed if you're a new staff. But this is a good team day one for these coaches. Now, we're not going to go through the whole thing for every team. Okay? Fafita, McMillan was an absolute massive swing. They kept their great receiver. They kept their great quarterback. On defense, they're going to do the exact same thing, and they should. They could really shock some people, and they're definitely a sleeper team to look out for. Arizona State. You can understand Kenny Dillingham's vision, but it's still a ways down the road. They lost Rashada and two of his best targets in the spring. That's not great. But you can't claim you're surprised by losing that quarterback. He's operated like a free agent since he got to the college level. Wow. That is a shot against Rashada. Again, this is anonymous. coaches in the Big 12talking about their foes within the Big 12. The quarterback from Michigan State, Sam Leavitt, is a solid replacement for Jaden, but it's not the same skill set, ceiling. This is a long-term rebuild. Kenny's a good recruiter. I think they're thinking long-term. Baylor. It seems like Aranda knows that the heat is on with the changes they made on offense. They're back to the air raid. Dequan Finn, the quarterback, Toledo, really good quarterback in the MAC conference. Really good quarterback in the MAC conference. They need to fix the wide receiver. They need to fix the offensive line. And Aranda is going back to calling the defensive plays. They were bland on defense last year. Really predictable. Couldn't generate any pressure. The question we asked when he got hired was if Aranda could build out a Texas recruiting staff. The overall talent level is starting to answer our question. BYU. Last year, the hiring of the defensive coordinator, Jay Hill, is the big story. Because I think that side of the ball could turn a corner this season. If that's true, very good news for the BYU Cougar fans. They closed out a really strong recruiting class. Hill was a really good head coach at Weber State. Last year was a good example of a transition to Power 5 or Power 4 football. You run out of steam. You don't have the depth. You can't plug in guys after injuries. They should be better down the stretch this season. Some optimism from an anonymous Big 12 coach, Cincinnati Bearcats. The debut season was basically a disaster for them. But that wasn't the Luke Fickell roster from years past, for better or worse. They lacked identity on both sides of the ball. They didn't have outstanding skill pieces. It just looked a little messy all around. They're trying to rebuild the roster. The Cincinnati Bearcats trying to rebuild. Scatterfield can recruit, but it's an issue where they never really reached their potential at Louisville. And this is a very, very similar job. Scatterfield's got a big contract, so he probably won't feel the heat this season. But they have to represent that they have a plan and a vision moving forward. This has always been a job with a high ceiling for coaches who understand it. Colorado Buffaloes, it's going to be a circus like last season, so expect the unexpected. Again, Athlon Sports, they do this every year. They interview anonymous coaches within the conference, and these anonymous coaches talk about their foes. The known quantity at Colorado is the quarterback. And when you look at the kid, Shedeur Sanders, away from the hype and his dad, he can make legit throws. I absolutely agree. And has innate talent and great instincts. I absolutely agree. Shedeur Sanders does a lot of great things on the football field. When he's getting rushed, he still continues to look downfield. He can make all the throws. Expect improvement at the skill positions across the board. They are aggressively portaling, but they need to put some studs opposite of Travis Hunter. It doesn't matter what noise Prime makes. They cannot have a winning season without a functional run game and a legit offensive line, and they lost Dylan Edwards, a really good running back, speedster. That's the one position, and he went to Kansas State, for goodness sake. That's the one position group you can't really portal in one cycle. That offensive line. If they're halfway better there, they'll have a winning season. It's all about the O-line for Colorado. Houston. Now, I'm just going to let my Houston Cougar brothers and sisters know I'm probably going to have Houston predicted to come in last. in the Big 12 this year. It doesn't mean I don't believe in Willie Fritz. It's just that I think he's going to change everything up. I think I'm going to have Houston finishing in 16th place. Hiring Willie Fritz makes so much sense for the program. Fritz is the ultimate steady hand, just a consistent, hard-nosed football coach. Finally getting a job where they want to really support the program at the top level. The defensive coordinator, Wood, is going to be a head coach soon. Expect a lot of the Tulane 3-4. 3-4. If offensive coordinator Barbay can help Donovan Smith, and if he's healthy, they have a lot of receiver talent on that roster, provided guys don't portal out because of the culture change. They weren't untalented last season by any stretch. They were just sloppy. Iowa State. This will be a really telling season for Matt Campbell. Can he rebuild that program in the portal in the NIL era? A few years ago, it seemed like his name was out there for every job, and then they fell back to earth. The Cyclones fell back to earth. They didn't show anything from the new offense in the spring. Their issues are talent-based, not scheme, not culture. They don't have the guys they need year in, year out. Are they going to change and adapt to the transfer world? Can you still win in a league like ours just relying on recruit and developed system? They added a few pieces this year, so maybe they're changing it up. Iowa Cyclones. The Kansas Jayhawks. Anonymous coach talking about their foe, the Kansas Jayhawks. The school locking down Lance Leipold is the biggest move of their entire offseason. He is going to be rumored for everything that opens, but they're aiming to win the league and go to the playoff. At that program, from where it started, that is nothing short of amazing. This coaching staff has created one of the greatest turnaround stories in college football. Replacing Andy Kotelnicki, the great offensive coordinator, with Jeff Grimes is more about how Grimes will acclimate to the Kansas system. The quarterback, Jalen Daniels, is a proven talent at quarterback, and they have some great running backs. This is a season where they should be considered a Big 12 title contender. Holy smokes. The Kansas Jayhawks, considered a Big 12 title contender. They have depth, they have experience, they have talent. Woo! The Kansas Jayhawks getting a whole lot of love from an anonymous coach with inside the Big 12. Kansas State. Losing former offensive coordinator Colin Klein is a big deal, but Matt Wells has a ton of experience. If you're looking for a noticeable change, it will probably come in how they build out on their passing game around Avery Johnson. Keeping him from transferring out after losing the offensive coordinator is a huge win for them. It puts them at the top half of the new league for sure. Chris Kleiman has done a really fantastic job blending the reality of recruiting and the portal to the K-State identity. They're still great at development talent and finding those hidden players, but they're out fighting for stars too. And we saw that here in the offseason, in the portal season. Oklahoma State Cowboys. Some guys were writing Mike Gundy off for dead last season, but he's a hell of a coach. They gutted their way through that one. Remember at the start of the season? Not good. Not good. But they dug out of the hole. Oklahoma State won a bunch of games at the end of the season. They did not give up. Gundy and that staff, they held that team together. Offensive coordinator Casey Dunn's been there. He's been there for years. And defensive coordinator Nardo, both being back, helped with the consistency they built towards the end of last season. The running back, Ollie Gordon, absolute stud. Maybe a Heisman guy. And Alan Bowman, he's a vet. I think this is his 7th year. The offense is fine. It really comes down to how much better the defense can get to put them in the conference title race or not. TCU, the Horned Frogs. A pretty big case of a title run hangover here last year. The truth about Sonny Dykes is that they weren't as good as the 2022 team, and the program isn't as bad as the 23 season. The truth is closer to what they'll do this season when the roster really belongs to this staff. They're moving away from the 3-3-5. Defensive coordinator Avalos is going to want to rush 4 and shake up their personnel. That defense was dreadful last year. So they're moving away from the 3-3-5. If they can find a quarterback, they'll be fine this season. They got a quarterback. I think Hoover's a good quarterback. Or he showed that at the end of last season. It's just been a lot of big swings with this program the last 2 years. Texas Tech Red Raiders. They've lost a ton of production on defense. That really jumps out at you. This season is going to test the staff's ability to develop their guys. It's year 3. So all the hype about being better tied in with the Texas high schools has to start showing up. Remember when we heard all that, right? McGuire, the staff he built, it's all more tied in to the high school, the programs throughout the state. It's got to start showing up right now, right here, year 3. Offensively, it's hard to criticize their scheme or the overall production because it seems like they're always getting a backup quarterback ready to play after an injury. That is true. They've lost all their good receiver talent to the portal. So there's a lot of rebuilding to do there. Best case scenario is that they cobble together a line from the portal to help out that running back Brooks because he's a legit dude. No question about it. Every top 10 running back list you see coming for the 2024 season, Brooks is on that list. Usually at the back end, but he's on that top 10 running back list. UCF. KJ Jefferson was the no-brainer quarterback transfer of the offseason. He's going to thrive in Gus Malzahn's system. And there won't be any adjustment needed from either side. Interesting. New defensive coordinator. Now, we talked about Ted Roof a few months ago. We talked about him. Ted Roof and, anyways, we'll get to it. Ted Roof is more of a buddy hire. He definitely lost his fastball at Oklahoma. But Malzahn has had a lot of success at UCF by keeping his guys locked in at all the key coaching positions. They're getting better and better in recruiting. Gus has given them what the administration built for a long time, that real shot at being another power team in the state of Florida. They've upped their game in every way. I'm surprised that the anonymous coach did not talk about, or at least Athlon did not put it in the article about the great running back that UCF has this year, Hardy. Utah. If you had to pick one program coming in from the Pac-12 as a legit contender It's definitely these guys on day one. Utah is replacing a lot of guys in the wide receiver group and secondary, but the system and culture there is so steady. They're coming from a conference where they built a brand by bullying, finesse offenses, and creating that crazy home environment. This team was way better than their record in 23 when you factor in injuries, especially in offense. If quarterback Cameron Rising is back and healthy all season, they've got a legit shot at their first year Big 12 title. And I agree. I absolutely agree. The West Virginia Mountaineers. Neil Brown is a fantastic program manager and never really showed any of the strain from the hot seat. Neil Brown was on the hot seat. Neil Brown was on the PATC hot seat. No question about it. But he showed up. West Virginia, real good last year. It's hard to tell how much they've turned the corner. A lot of that depends on if they can help Garrett Green elevate. Now, we talked about that at Peek Around the Corner. Garrett Green does have to elevate. He can't be completing 53, 52% of his passes. That's got to get up. That's got to be at 58, 59, 60%. Got to be a little bit more consistent. Can't have so many balls being knocked down at the line of scrimmage. Back to the article. He could be a top quarterback in the nation if there's support around him. Defensively, they're returning a lot of guys who were decent last year. Not spectacular. There's a lot of similarities to Neil's time at Troy. He's going to build and find that right culture, and then it takes off. They could be. The West Virginia Mountaineers could be a surprise contender for the league title if everything goes right on offense. A lot of those freshmen last year could really break out this year. Again, Big 12 anonymous coach talking about the foes within the Big 12. And there it is. That is some good stuff, fun stuff. Athlon does that all the time. They do that all the time. Every year when you pick up their magazine, a little section, they color it out. I think it's usually in yellow. But whatever. Anonymous coach says this about a team. Real good stuff. Big 12, man. I mean, I can tell you my top 5 or 6 teams. I just can't tell you right now what order I'm going to put them in. And I'm going to do that sometime in June. But, you know, you got Kansas. You got Kansas State. Of course, you got Utah. You got to throw in, I believe you got to throw in Oklahoma State. I think you got to throw in West Virginia. That's already 5 teams. And Iowa State going to be a little, I think UCF, I don't know. Unbelievable. It's going to be very, very, very difficult. Lee says Neil Brown will be on the hot seat once the Penn State rolls in there and smacks them around. Holy smokes. The line is Penn State minus 10 going into Morgantown. Big noon. Fox. Penn State, West Virginia. West Virginia is getting 10 points. Getting all fired up. Okay. So, let's get in to the main story of private equity. Big Lubbock, when you had to start your second string O-line and third string quarterback, I know the quarterback injuries of Texas Tech and your receivers are crap. 7 wins last year was amazing. Christopher Shannon, I thought Neil Brown was toast, but Garrett Green saved his butt. I thought Neil Brown was toast as well. I took the L on that last year a couple times. They got 2 good running backs. I don't know. Arizona, I got to have Arizona in there as well. So, I don't know how, look, you know how they do the media, you know how they do the media, the media poll every year. They show you what the media thinks, the Big 12 media, the SEC media, whatever. Last year, the Pac-12 media had USC winning, and we had Washington. The Big 12 media, how are they going to rank the Big 12 is going to be fascinating. And how close are those votes going to line up? It's probably going to be Utah number 1, right? When the Big 12 media votes on it, as they enter into the Big 12 media days in July, it's probably going to be Utah number 1. But who's going to be number 2? Who's going to be number 2? Number 3, number 4? And I think the votes are going to be like 1 vote difference. I think it's just going to be Kansas State, Kansas, Arizona. It's probably Oklahoma State. I think those 4 will probably get the next 3 spots. I do think there's a lot of respect out there for West Virginia. I don't know. It's going to be wild. It's going to be absolutely wild. Okay. I want to go back. Private, we're talking about Big 12. Are they pro private capital? Is the Big 12 going to be the power conference that makes the big splash with private capital? Are they going to be the ones that go out first and do this? And if they do it, then does the ACC have to follow suit? And of course, we know all the issues with the ACC. They don't even know if they're going to have their media rights extended beyond 2027. But Yormark is on more stable ground. The Big 12 is on more stable ground. I want to go back and look at what was written from The Athletic when Brett Yormark was hired. Very interesting. The Big 12's Brett Yormark bet why a pivotal commissioner search ended in surprise. This was June 29th, 2022. Max Olson, Matt Fortuna, Nicole Auerbach. It talks about how Brett Yormark left a lasting impression on the Big Ten Commissioner Jim Delaney. We're not going to go through that story. It was the early 1980s. Jim Delaney was running the Ohio Valley Conference. There is a link provided in the description box. You can read this whole article. Whoops, and now I lost it. I do have the Athletic, but I don't have it. That's fine. I'm just going to give you guys the... I'll just give you the fast version. The quick version of it. It talks about how Brett Yormark, thank you so much, Corey, for the gifted membership. Holy smokes. And the Big Lubbock was gifted a membership. Wow. Thank you so very much. Corey, you are hereby knighted, cloak and dagger once again. Thank you so much, Corey, for your incredible generosity, handing out those gift memberships. Thank you so much for your kindness. The Big Lubbock, you are hereby granted, knighted, cloak and dagger. Big Lubbock, make sure when you have time, say thank you for Corey's generosity. Thank you so much, Corey. Basically in the article, this was back when Brett Yormark was hired. Brett Yormark has aggressive tendencies going after sponsorship deals, what he did with NASCAR, what he did with the team at NASCAR. He'd been around the NBA. The NBA, 2/3 of the NBA National Basketball Association has private equity involved in those franchise. Brett Yormark is, and let's get to, this is from John Wilner. Big 12's news and notes. Yormark, Livingston, Baylor. They talk house settlement, private equity, football parity, and more. Commissioner Brett Yormark views private equity as validation of growth. So Brett Yormark is not looking at this like it's a negative thing. It's not a negative connotation to talk about it. The Big 12 concluded its spring business meetings on Thursday with a look to the fall competition season and the ever-present legal issues shaping the future of college sports. They fielded questions in Irving, Texas. Before the discussion turned to the House NCAA lawsuit, Livingston managed to highlight the Big 12's greatest strength, its competitive balance across multiple sports. A state of affairs that should continue when the conference grows to 16 schools this summer. It will be compelling to watch, she said. And I don't know that you'll see that in other conferences. It's going to be compelling to watch. There's going to be parity, competition from top to bottom going into November. Although Livingston didn't name names or specify sports, the first Big 12 football season without Texas and Oklahoma should be fascinating. Unlike the SEC and the Big 10, the Big 12 lacks a prohibitive favorite. Kansas, Kansas State, Utah, Arizona, West Virginia, Iowa State, Oklahoma State are all considered candidates to reach the conference championship. No team carries a projected win total as determined by FanDuel in the double digits. Holy smokes. I think about November, Yormark said, and how the race for the championship will create engagement with fans. I believe that throughout college football. I believe that through the G5 conferences. We're going to be looking at the G5 rankings for the leaders in those conferences more than we've ever had before. We're going to be looking at 2 lost teams at the beginning of November, trying to figure out how they can get to the playoffs. I think you guys all know this. I think the expanded college football playoffs is an unbelievable, great thing that happened to the sport that we love. Democratized the sport, gave it more access. It made more games more valuable during larger parts of the season than ever before. That is my take on it. The news conference eventually focused on the issue looming over college sports, the settlement agreement. We're not focusing on that. It talks about, there's much to resolve, including the role of NIL, Title IX. And we saw the SEC meetings, people coming up. Basically, nobody knows what's still going on. Still don't know how the outside collectives will work. Still don't know how Title IX is impacted. Asked if every third paragraph down on the screen that you're looking at, third paragraph down, asked if every athletic department in the Big 12 planned to share the maximum allowed under the terms of the deal, approximately $21 million. Asked if every athletic department in the Big 12 planned to share the maximum allowed. We're going to compete at a very high level. In making the right investments is part of competing at the very high level. I anticipate us doing what we need to do. I'm going to circle back to that. In addition to $21 million in revenue sharing, the settlement is expected to add at least $5 million annually and perhaps $10 million to cover an increase in the number of scholarships available for athletes in numerous sports. We're going to circle back to this. And then other notes and nuggets from news from the conference on the potential of athletic departments. On the potential for athletic departments to use private equity as a means of solidifying their financial position. Yormark said, in some respects, private equity is a validation of where this industry is going and the growth. I don't look at it as a bad thing. Yormark said the Big 12 is open for business more than ever. But when asked if it meant he was looking to expand again, he said, no, I'm not. He described the conference as being open to exploring every opportunity to create value. We're going to circle back on that. The Big 12 would distribute $470 million this year to current members, an average of $33.6 million per campus. However, each of the 4 new schools will receive partial shares, $18 million each. That leaves the 10 continuing members with approximately $40 million per campus. Now, there's a couple things I want to get to before I get to your comments and phone calls. One, I strongly disagree. I strongly disagree with those advocating on X and on message boards that somehow the addition of UCF, BYU, Houston, and Cincinnati was a bad emotional decision made by Big 12 leadership, and at the time it was Bowlesby, not Yormark, because the other 10 members, or members before these 4 additions, the 8 members, are going to receive a little bit less money. To me, that is unwise. It's an unwise position. The additions of UCF, BYU, Houston, and Cincinnati was a play for the future. It made the Big 12 stronger for the future. It gave them bigger bandwidth. It made it so they could go after the Pac-12. Put them in a position. Pac-12 could not backfill with Houston, could not backfill with BYU once the LA schools left. This was short-term minimal losses for the 8 Big 12 schools for a longer-term play, which gets me back to private equity. On the potential for athletic departments to use private equity as a means of solidifying their financial position, Yormark said in some respects, private equity is a validation of where this industry is going and the growth, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't know how a commissioner, I don't know the language a commissioner could have used to be more pro private capital. I don't know what else, other than saying, we're definitely going to do it. We're definitely going to do it. We've been talking to private capital. We're going to take the best bid. Besides that, this is the most pro-private capital talk that a commissioner, especially from the Power 4 conference, could have said. And then when you go back to this part, the question was asked if every athletic department in the Big 12 planned to share the maximum allowed under the terms. This is what Yormark said. We are going to compete at a very high level. The Big 12 is going to compete at a very high level. And making the right investments is part of competing at a very high level. I anticipate us doing what we need to do. It's that last sentence. For me, it's that last sentence. I anticipate us, the Big 12, doing what we need to do. Whatever we need to do, we need to get there. We need to get to that $20 million in revenue sharing. We need to be able to compete here in the short run to ensure our future. We need to make the investment. So, again, tell me how wrong I've got it. But I don't think this is just about individual Big 12 athletic departments. I don't think this is about just individual Big 12 athletic departments. I don't think this is just about Kansas State making a decision on private equity, private capital. I don't think this is just about Cincinnati making a decision on private equity and private capital. I don't think this is just a decision in a vacuum for Baylor, for Kansas, for West Virginia, for Iowa State. I think, and I could be wrong on this, but I think this is going to be turning into a conference-wide investment for the conference to have the strong relationship with a private capital firm. And with that private capital firm possibly having strong relationships with sponsorships. And this is a way a sponsorship can pay back a private capital investment. I think the Big 12, if I'm reading all this correctly, if one of our BTM associates has it correct, I think the Big 12 is going to do what they need to do to make sure they have the investment put in the right places, to make sure they have the money, the resources to do it, and to use that private equity contact, to use what the context that Brett Yormark has built up over the years. They make sure they invest to take it a little bit in the short term, get money in, a little bit on the back end, but betting on themselves. Betting on themselves that the Big 12 is going to be way more higher value 5 or 6 years from now. That basketball is going to be of higher value. And that they can compete if they can punch above their weight just a little bit in football, if they can punch above their weight, punch above the ACC, make sure there's a big gap between them and the G5, and get mighty, mighty, mighty close to the Big Ten, that money, that the private equity money or private capital money that we're all going to be worrying about here for the Big 12, you're not going to be worrying about that if it all comes through. If betting on yourself happens, if it comes through, the NBA, 2/3 of the NBA franchises have it. Private equity. Having a sliver of their ownership of those franchises. To be able to move around cash real quick. To be able to get a better percentage on a bond, whatever. On a loan, whatever it is. And then these NBA franchises are betting on themselves. And of course, here comes the bigger NBA media deal. Is the Big 12 about to do this? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just going to be by individual schools. Maybe. Maybe there's going to be some schools that aren't going to do it at all. But you look at the AAC commissioner, it sounds like they are well on the talks of getting private capital money into that conference. And I think it might be a conference deal as well, a conference-wide deal as well. Let's get to we're going to open up the phone lines. You can talk about anything in college football that you want. You don't have to talk about private equity or private capital. You can if you want. You can say, yeah, I want my school to do it. No, I do not want my school to do it. I want the conference that my school resides in. We got to do it. No, we can't do it. Let the ACC do it. Let the Big Ten do it. Let the AAC do it. But don't let my Big 12 conference do it. Because we're going to lose out in the end. Or is your opinion that, well, we need to do it? Because if we don't do it in the Big 12, and the ACC does it, we're going to be left behind when it comes to the recruiting battles here in the next 5 or 6 years. Remember, the conference football playoff, the percentage payouts, can be looked at and redone in about 2028. And it could be decided, the change in payouts could be decided, it will probably be decided on what conference is doing better than their projected current payouts. In other words, with the Big 12, if one of the schools in the Big 12 gets to the championship game, wins the national championship, if the Big 12 punches above their weight, they're probably going to get higher percentage of the conference college football playoffs, and they've already possibly could have paid off their private capital investment. You can talk about anything you want in college football. The phone line is now open. 763-260-1333. 763-260-1333. Let it rip. Expedition Greg. Good evening, everyone. Sorry I'm late. Thank you for the super chat, Expedition Greg. Nobody is ever late. Come in when you can. Leave when you have to. Appreciate you coming here, Expedition Greg. Mr. Buckeye, Expedition Greg. The phone lines are open. 763-260-1333. Give us a call. The number is also on the ticker below on the bottom of your screen. Just checking out a report here real quick. Again, Leon County. This is the case. This is the Attorney General for the state of Florida, Attorney General Moody, suit against the ACC. Office of the Attorney General versus the Atlantic Coast Conference. Attorney General Moody, the state of Florida, did send an email to Judge Dempsey. This happened on Friday. We're going to find out if we're going to be able to, we're probably going to be able to read that email at some point. Right? So buckle up. We'll talk about that early this coming up week. Just to give you a heads up on that. I expect something to pop on that probably tomorrow, but we'll find out. More and more information coming in about the EA Sports 2025 video game, college football video game. I'm not a big video game player anymore. I used to be, but I've gotten old. My hand-eye coordination is probably too slow. But I do like the wear and tear aspect of the game that's coming out. I think that is fantastic. I think that is great. In other words, you can't run the same guy over and over. You can give that running back the ball 40 times. But he's going to slow down as the game goes on, and he's more susceptible to being injured. If you're playing a season, you got to keep an eye on your players in that game. Don't wear them out. I think that is absolutely fantastic. Anthony Carlson, Sparty, is already pre-ordered it. So your lead running back for the Spartans is Carter, right? Carter? You're not going to be able to run him you can, Anthony. You can run him 40 times. And be careful, Anthony. Be careful how you use Aiden Childs. You can't be running them out there. You can't have designed running plays for your quarterback. You can. But you don't want to get him nicked up, Mr. Carlson. You don't want to get him nicked up. DP says, I don't think the SEC is dumb enough to give up both Clemson and Florida State to the Big Ten. Well, it is a fascinating conversation that pretty much everybody is having. I really can't add any more to what I've said, except just to reconfirm that North Carolina and Virginia I think there is a better chance. A better chance. Now, this is going to sound crazy. So, just bear with me here. So, I think there's a better chance of the SEC taking North Carolina, Virginia, Clemson, and Florida State, all four of them, before I would say the Big Ten taking North Carolina. The SEC next expansion and the ACC is going to implode. It is. Is going to be North Carolina centric. It's not a shot at Clemson. It's not a shot at Florida State. If the SEC is willing to eat 4 times, then yes, Florida State and Clemson are potential new SEC members. But the SEC is all about North Carolina. And again, a lot of people say North Carolina football isn't worth that. I get all that. I get all that. But I got to tell you, I have no idea. I have no idea what when Brett McMurphy said that the SEC doesn't want Florida State and Clemson. He was using pretty direct language. He also said, if the SEC came to the decision that they didn't want the Big Ten to go down in there and get them, yes, the SEC could move on them, whatever. But Brett McMurphy used pretty blunt language. Pete Thamel has said that the SEC number 1 target is North Carolina and Virginia. He's said that a few times. Paul Feinbaum has basically said that directly, insinuated. Paul Feinbaum said, asked Brett McMurphy, where would Florida State and Clemson go? And Brett McMurphy said Big Ten. And Paul Feinbaum said something to the effect of, yeah, because they get what the SEC doesn't want. The SEC in this expansion is North Carolina centric. And there's probably national reporters questioning it. Why? I know everybody else is saying why? We have been told we have been told directly, pounded into my skull, that the SEC, if the ACC implodes, they're going up to North Carolina and Virginia. And we're not talking to the same people that all these other people are talking to. Well, maybe, but I wouldn't know. And people keep, and I love the conversations happening on X, but people are discussing, well, ESPN is going to make more money on a Florida State SEC game, football game, than they would make on North Carolina or Virginia. You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. And maybe the SEC, hold on a second.
Call from
Dan.
I'm sorry, Dan?
Yes,
Okay.
Dan. How you doing, Greg? Nice to talk to you.
Good. Can you hold on a second? I just want to finish my thought.
Yeah, you bet.
You
Take
got
your
it.
time.
Now, maybe the SEC is going to have to decide and will decide that they're going to have to eat 4 times to satisfy everybody's interest. Maybe they're going to have to do that. For ESPN to give up extra money for a 9th conference game, what have you. Maybe the SEC decides that they have to eat 4 times. Maybe. But when we're talking about SEC interests and not ESPN, when we're talking about the conference interest, it is North Carolina and Virginia. It is about, remember, the number, we all know about the incredible strength of SEC football, unbelievable, most powerful conference in the country. But when we're talking about these universities, ultimately, when they're talking about conference expansion, when they're talking about expanding the brand of the Southeastern Conference, they want to know what's in it for their university. And those presidents, those faculty members, they want to rub shoulders with what they would consider the higher end of that whole university faculty president community. They want to be able to challenge to get more and more students. It's a more challenging environment to compete, to get students. Your front porch of your university, if your athletic departments, is all about competing to get more students, to get them enrolled in your school, because it's all about the money. And that difference between a Florida State home game and a North Carolina home game, yes, there's a difference. But doesn't make up for the difference of the new demographics, the new footprint, the new money, all the sponsorship the national advertisers want to get in North Carolina and Virginia. Again, it's a tough call in my mind. But everything, and I mean everything, everybody tells us that North Carolina and Virginia, getting into those two states, battling for more international students, having Georgia and Alabama and Florida be able to better compete with all those high school students coming from Virginia, North Carolina, to get them enrolled in other state universities. This is what the SEC wants. The ESPN, they have definitely different interests. So we'll see. But anyways, Dave, I appreciate or is it Dan? I'm sorry.
Dan.
Dan, I apologize. Dan,
yeah.
Thank you for your patience. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, interesting take on the Big 12. I'm a Big 12 fan, so I think the commissioner, he's going to try to put the Big 12 in the best position to be the number 3 conference.
And that might be with private capital?
Yeah, I think that they'll try to do that. I mean, it's going to be kind of an interesting mix to try to get that all set up. But I think with his connections, I think that, what he's done in the past, I think that'll definitely help the conference going forward. If the ACC, my question, if the Big Ten does get Florida State and Clemson, which I totally agree, I think that's what's, in my opinion, I think that's what I've been listening to your shows all the time, and I love your insight, and I think that would be a great fit for the Big Ten and for those two schools. But if the SEC does go into Virginia and North Carolina, would they take North Carolina State and Virginia Tech just to keep it simple, to get to 20 teams, or you think there's going to be a lot of back and forth there? And then I'll get off the line. I'll make one more point, and then I'll let you answer that, Greg. But if that happens, then the Big 12 can get some teams. Where do you think they would go? And thanks again, Greg, for taking my call. Have a great evening. We'll talk to you later.
You got it. Thank you so much.
All right.
And again, Dan, thanks for your patience. I appreciate it.
You bet. Have a nice evening.
Yeah,
Take care, Greg.
too.
All right, bye-bye.
Well, again, fascinating. Great question, and I don't know the answer. Sorry, Dan, I don't know the answer. SEC expansion is going to be North Carolina centric. Connective tissues all around North Carolina. They want to get up there in the new footprint. If you gave them a shot of truth serum, they probably don't want to. They probably don't want to go and take North Carolina State and Virginia Tech. They might have to. We don't know. We don't know. The Board of Governors, they got all the power, as you know, Dan, if you've been watching the show, and maybe the SEC. Maybe it's the reason why the SEC, we talk, and I don't know if I made up this phrase. I don't know if it's a real phrase, this kinetic energy. We're just going to go keep using it. This kinetic energy It isn't there. It isn't there when we're talking about third-party talks, SEC interests, people who hold SEC interests with the people who hold the two schools that are in the courts, Florida State and Clemson. It isn't there. And maybe that is what's leading national college football reporters to say the SEC has no interest in Florida State and Clemson. I don't know. I don't talk to them. They don't know me from a hole in the wall. I'm just saying. There's no kinetic energy. There's nothing going on, at least not in compared to what's going on the other side of the fence. So getting back to Dan's question that I'm unfortunately am not going to be able to answer with any certainty at all. Is it part of the reason why there's no kinetic energy with the SEC and Florida State and Clemson and third, discussions that are not first party talks? Is it because the SEC knows that they might have to keep two other open spots at the table because what they might have to deal with the Virginia legislature and the North Carolina Board of Governors? Very well, possibly. Could be true. And then you got Duke. So, boy, I do not know, Dan. I don't know. We're going to follow it. We're going to keep following it. We're going to keep poking and prodding. Again, this change, this pivotal change, we started reporting on this on May 23rd. We told you we had to tear down we had to go to on any given Saturday sports book that's on Kurt Gowdy Avenue. We had to rip down the odds because something pivotal had changed. And then 4 or 5 days later, we told you the change. And then at the same days, National Reporter comes out and says basically the same thing. During our show, he's saying the same thing on another show. And I'm not saying that the pivotal change happened on May 23rd. Suddenly, everybody's saying, look, Greg, the people we talk, look, Greg, there's no talk between the SEC and Florida State and Clemson. No, it's just the time that we finally could say, we got it. We got to rip the odds down. There was too much chatter and too much no chatter. The combination of those two led us to what we had to do. Take everybody off the stage, rip down the odds. And then at the same time, it's being reported nationally from a national reporter. Well, a few days later, after we did our action. So maybe we're all being fooled. I'm being fooled. Maybe we're all being fooled. Maybe the SEC is laying in wait. Maybe they know they got the personal connections anyways in Tallahassee. They don't, they may not need to do all this. Keep in touch. Let's keep in touch. Let's keep in touch. Let's keep in touch. Let's meet in Chicago. Let's meet 40 miles west of Columbus. Let's keep in touch. Let's keep in touch. Maybe they don't need to do that. Maybe they're throwing out, maybe it's a false flag, all these conspirators. Maybe this whole thing about them wanting North Carolina, Virginia, maybe they put that out there months ago, and we're all falling into the trap. I don't think so. Now, remember, if we go back to if we go back to the Big 12, if we go back to the Big 12 drama that we had here in the Holy Smokes Theater, and we kept saying in February 24th of 2023, we put it up on the odds on any given Saturday sports book. We put up the odds that now, the Big 12 was favored to poach from the Pac-12. And we got told we were idiots all over the place. Pac-12's not breaking up.
Call from
Jeff Fuller.
Jeff Foley, can you hold for 1 moment, please?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it. Just got to finish my thought, and I still have a little bit more to answer from Dan's question. But, and during that Big 12 drama, I kept saying to you guys, I said, you know what, maybe we're wrong. Maybe PATC's wrong. But the chatter is so thick on how disappointed the Pac-12 presidents were in the deals they were not seeing from the commissioner and his staff. Remember, we had the Arizona State money purge letters. We kept saying to you, the chatter is so negative. In fact, it was more negative than what Dennis Dodd and these national reporters were saying. And they were getting skewered all over the place. But they were actually being nice to the Pac-12. It wasn't a grand conspiracy perpetrated by Endeavor or whatever this stupid line of thinking was. They were actually downplaying it. We weren't downplaying it because we don't have to. We kept telling you the Big 12 is going to poach. Colorado's. It's the same thing here. The chatter is this kinetic energy, this thing that's going on. The SEC very well could be successful in eating 4 times before the Big 10 and the Big 12 even knows what happened. Could be, possibly. But when the SEC eats, they're going to be eating North Carolina and Virginia. That we do know, or that is their number one goal. They're probably going to be successful. And one other, Dan said, his last part of the question was, where do you think the Big 12 would go to when it comes to expansion? When the ACC implodes. And again, a lot of that is determined about how much money it's going to cost to get out of the ACC. The higher number, the more difficult it is going to be for the Big 12 to poach. The lower the number, it's going to be easier. And I generally agree with the consensus out there. I think you're looking at Louisville. I think you're looking at Pittsburgh and Virginia Tech. If they're not part of something else, that's how I would answer it. But we got a long ways to go from where we are now to where that. We'll bring that up later. Thank you, Dan, for the phone call. Jeff Fuller, thank you for your patience. Thanks for calling, sir. The floor is yours.
Yes, sir. Great to join. Sounds like things are. You mentioned there's kinetic energy, right? This whole conference realignment is all about potential energy. That's the boulder sitting at the top of the hill that, once it gets released, it's got that momentum to go downhill. It turns that potential energy into kinetic energy. Yeah. And that's interesting to hear that you're hearing and you're seeing more kinetic energy in the whole ACC situation. That's going to play out. We know that's going to come. It's just a matter of when. Yeah. I really appreciate you bringing up, the Big 12. You mentioned about sort of the Pac-12 saga and the demise and, all the negativity around all the deals that were coming through. Yeah. I think it's just, we saw it with that sort of the hubris and the pride, whether it's academic, elitism of not wanting to, associate with other institutions, or just the media valuations they were getting. I mean, it's been reported that, the Utah president had had a economics professor, some professor on his campus that came up with a number of 50 million per team after USC and UCLA were gone and lost the Los Angeles market. And if they were able to convince anyone else that that was in the realm of what they should be getting just from their media contract, no wonder they rejected the deal that Yormark picked right up and snatched out from them. So we're rehashing the past on that, but as far as going forward, I think there's 2 points I want to make here. Number one, you mentioned about the private capital and will the Big 12 as a conference sort of buy into that whole model?
Yeah.
And will big private equity, private capital companies come and partner with the conference as a whole, and then schools within the conference can decide how much they need to dip into their year to year to sort of be competitive and be at the max. The concern, of course, with the Big 12 in general is there's so much parity. You don't have the massive brands that demand the top 5 recruiting classes, the yearly top 10 recruiting classes. You don't have the blue bloods that are just always there at the top with the fan bases and the on-field product. And therefore, that's the beauty of it, is the parity, and the games will be exciting, and anyone could win the conference or could make the conference championship game potentially. There's almost no gimme games in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. And Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama fans may look and just say, "Oh, they're all gimme games," But when you look, they're good coaches, they're solid, starting players. There's definitely not the depth that you have with with the programs that have blue chippers right and left, 3 deep. But the concern is, if everyone is pretty good to start with, and everyone invests equally, and the conference makes it so that everyone can invest to the max in their NIL, in their developing their football programs, does that sort of exacerbate the problem? And they just eat each other and keep each other out of the playoff. That's one potential concern about letting everyone compete at the highest level. Does that does that not pay off in the end? Because you need your teams that like Vanderbilt or Mississippi State or traditionally Kentucky and South Carolina. In the SEC, you need your teams that'll take their losses and just be happy to be there. And not really challenge. The Big Ten, the ACC, come on. I mean, that's people say that the ACC has a huge perception advantage, and that's all about, honestly, 2 schools, Florida State and Clemson. The football products that they put out there, and the fan bases they have are great, but that's the only perception advantage there, is that they have 2 programs that are on the national radar more than any other Big 12 program. But if you look down the line, they have a lot more guaranteed wins, on their schedules than Big 12 teams do. And that's just I think anyone who looks at that will see that the average Big 12 team is pretty solid, and it is potentially right up there with the average, maybe slightly below average of the Super 2, the SEC and the Big Ten. So that's just one point there, and I don't know if you want to comment on that before I get to my second point.
Well, yeah, I got one question now. Here's and I'm not. How do I say this? What if Brett York? What if the Big 12 athletic directors, the commissioner, are looking at this like, we might need to do a conference-wide private equity plan. So the Big 12 schools might need like an extra $5 million, so they can get up to the range of Vanderbilt when it comes to resources to recruit football players. I think that's the question. It ain't so much. Okay, so Vanderbilt's going to lose most of their games. Vanderbilt. It isn't about. It's about making sure that the Vanderbilts, the bottom of the bottom of the SEC, the bottom of the Big Ten, making sure that the middle of the ACC don't have this money advantage over the Big 12 schools, so you start slipping behind a Vanderbilt in some of these other schools. Or that's where I'm like, sure, Vanderbilt's going to pile up the losses. Somebody's got to lose. But when it comes to resources and recruiting, because now they're direct payments, if Brett Yormark sees that, man, my Big 12 athletic departments, they need to get to that highest level of revenue sharing because we can't slip behind those other schools. You know what I'm saying?
Would they pull exactly. And I guess I'm thinking more in conference and who makes it to the playoff, because up until now we've just had a 14 playoff, and it's all about getting there. But you'll need that depth. You'll need that, that increased recruiting and increased NIL budget beyond this quote unquote, I don't know what they call it, a salary cap. It looks like this is the salary floor to compete at the highest level. And then the big programs are still going to, throw NIL money like crazy to get their top 5, top 10 recruiting classes. But I think you make a good point that, you want to invest and you want all your teams to invest so that if you get there into the playoffs, that you'll be more competitive there and or in your non-conference games or your non-playoff bowl games. The second point, I agree with you, about people who are sitting there saying, oh, look how much money the ACC conference brought in this year. And look at that compared to the Big 12. They brought in so much more money and, they're paying out more money per team. That actually was borderline not true if you look at the original members. But I think people are forgetting, number one, it's not apples to apples. The ACC was dealing with 14 teams and being paid for 14 teams. The Big 12 only had 10 teams being paid on that contract for this year. There was not pro rata to bring in, the 4 new schools, BYU, Cincy, UCF, and Houston. So, but I agree with you that was the right play, the long-term play to get in those, populous markets, the bigger fan bases, the upward trajectory programs from the non-P5 level, snatch those up in somewhat of a defensive play, as you say, but also, I just think it's highly dishonest to look at, the per team playouts and for this year, because this is I believe the only year, maybe it's next year still, it'll still play through with the half share payouts to the new schools. Yeah. But yeah, the pro rata thing was really big because the ACC in their contract, they got pro rata for Stanford and Cal, and I believe for SMU. I'm not completely sure on if SMU qualified for the pro rata there, but that's just a big difference about just how the media contracts for the different conferences were made. And yes, the ACC had more total, absolute value, a bigger number in the money they brought in. But if you look at the per school payouts, the Big 12 is well positioned to be currently even, but shortly ahead of the ACC in those media contract payouts. So that's all I wanted to point out. I think you made that relatively clear. Yep. And it's exciting to see where this is all heading.
Yep. I appreciate the call, Jeff Fuller. Call again, sir. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. All right.
Beautiful. I want to get to Jamie Thornton's statement here. Expedition Greg, I trust Greg on the Big Ten wanting Clemson. I just keep getting pushback about Clemson's academics from Big Ten people I talk with. And no, none of those includes the clown. I want to make sure that I want to make sure I'm presenting this to you in an accurate way. And I've said this before. For the Big Ten, it's not about getting what you want. It's about getting what you need. It doesn't mean they don't want Clemson, but when the ACC implodes, and it will, when the ACC implodes, the Big Ten will have the opportunity to finally expand into the Southeast. The Big Ten, as we're being told, is going to rush on in. The Big Ten, you can, and if you want, and it's okay if you disagree with us and peek around the corner. I'm just trying to tell you what we have come to, what we are being told. When the Big Ten rushes in, they're not going to be able to rush in and grab North Carolina. That's who they want. Big Ten's not going to be able to come in and grab Virginia. They're not going to be able to grab what their top targets are. But that is not going to stop them from getting into the Southeast. The Big Ten, when the ACC implodes, when it implodes, and we have this high drama, and we're going to be having 6-hour live shows, and it's going to be crazy. The Big Ten isn't going to, the Fox Sports and the Big Ten aren't going to walk away from it and saying, oh, we're not going to expand in the Southeast. The Big Ten is going to expand in the Southeast. So when you have that in mind, and when the Big Ten isn't not going to be able to, now you may think that the Big Ten is going to be able to get their top targets. We don't believe that's the case at Peek Around the Corner. Nobody really believes this, but maybe we're all wrong. So it isn't about like getting what you want, it's about getting what you need. So if you're talking about, if people are having a discussion on a message board or an X and they're saying Clemson's academics, not historically, Big Ten, they're gonna want somebody else, But if you put it into the reality of what we believe is about to happen.
Call from
Tristan Fives.
Tristan, can you hold on for a moment? Just need to finish my thought.
Oh, no problem.
Appreciate it. But if you put it in the context of the Big Ten not being able to grab their top targets, but needing to get going after what they can get, then the Clemson academic situation is not much of a story in this. The Big Ten is going to rush in and see if they can grab Southeast targets, knowing that the chance of them getting North Carolina is about nothing. Zilch, nada. Notre Dame not pulling the trigger yet. Big Ten can't wait. This is their opportunity. This is what they've been planning forever. This is what they've been planning since Jim Delaney decided that the Big Ten needed to be at least a 2-region conference. That's when they pulled the trigger on Rutgers and Maryland, because they couldn't get North Carolina and Virginia. They didn't get what they really wanted. They got what they need. They took USC, and that's what they wanted, and they got UCLA because they needed that to satisfy Fox Sports. They wanted the whole Los Angeles market. They're going to go down to the Southeast, the Big Ten. They're going to go ahead rushing in. Now, and North Carolina at this point ain't going to be ready. Miami's not going to be ready. No one else is going to be ready. When the settlement number is settled, the Big Ten is rushing in. It's not about getting exactly what they want. It's about getting what they need. The SEC is going to get what they want. And the SEC might get everything that they want. The SEC might eat 4 times in the Big Ten. But also, let me say this before I get to Tristan. If the SEC goes bam, if the SEC comes walking on in, strolling on in, and of course Clemson would have incredible interest. Florida State, obviously, even with the ESPN stuff going on. And if they're able to grab all 4 schools, North Carolina, Virginia, Florida State, and Clemson, the Big Ten is still going to do something. Probably Miami and something else. The Big Ten ain't going to walk away from the ACC implosion with nothing. But after all that, after everything we've said, the SEC's number 1 target is North Carolina, Virginia. And if they decide to eat 4, then the Big Ten might not even get their 3rd and 4th targets in this. Tristan, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Hey, Greg. Listen, I wanted to add a conspiratorial thought to this discussion. Do you remember back when they hammered out the playoff agreement for 2026 and beyond? So we have a 12-team format going for 2024 and 2025.
Yes, sir.
And then they started negotiating what would come after that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that playoff agreement is going to be calling for 16 teams, correct?
What was that?
With the playoff starting in 2026, isn't it going to be expanded to 16 teams, or is it still going to be 12?
It's still at 12. They might go to 14, not 16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just from my memory, and I could be remembering it wrong, but is it true that they were expecting Fox to bid, and Fox ended up not bidding on it, and then ESPN won the bid for those playoffs, and what people were estimating was that the playoff, they were going to have to bid, the winning bid was going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 billion, but because Fox didn't bid, ESPN ended up getting it for about $1.4 billion.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember all that. Yep.
Okay. So the question that I have, and again, like I said, this is coming from my conspiratorial mind, what did Fox get in exchange for not bidding on the playoff? My opinion, Greg, is that what they got in exchange is the opportunity to take FSU and Clemson. More FSU than Clemson. I mean, it might be Clemson also, but the main target, of course, is FSU. That's what I think they got in exchange for not bidding on the playoff.
Interesting theory, interesting conspiracy. I would not buy into it, but I think a lot of people would. A lot of people would be open to that. One of the things we've learned over time is the reason why Fox did not really bid is they only really had the opportunity to bid on the first round games because ESPN already has a bowl agreement with the New Year's bowl games that are going to be part of the expanded playoffs. They already had those contracts for the next 5 or 6 years. So in reality, there couldn't be really open competitive bidding on the entire expanded playoffs until the next go around, until after 2030-31.
Okay.
So that is the reason why Fox. So Fox said, Amazon said, if we're going to do this, we're going to want to be ensured that we got at least one semifinal game in the 6-year package, 8-year package, and a championship game. Well, ESPN already had those games. They already had most of that all wrapped up. So I think that is why Fox bailed. I don't think it had to do with a coordinated arrangement on future expansion.
Well, you may be right about that, Greg, and it sounds like you've got some good information. So I'm glad I ran it by you.
Mm-hmm.
But let me say this: at the SEC meetings last year, 2023, Sankey was interviewed by someone, and they were asking about expansion, and he said, "Well, if expansion, his answer, the gist of it was, if expansion comes along, we're going to be more interested in our current footprint." Okay, and so when he made that statement, everyone assumed that he's, of course, the current footprint would be like Florida State, Miami,
yeah.
Clemson. Okay.
Yep.
To me, that is the true intention. Like the SEC has that, in my opinion, as the top priority. Now, are they saying that UNC and UVA are the top priority? Okay, yeah, they could be saying that. But, Greg, that might be the top priority now that Florida State is headed to the Big Ten. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like what's going on here is, look, ESPN and the SEC, they've been in bed together. From the SEC perspective, the whole goal of doing business with ESPN was to make it easy for ESPN to move the most valuable brands into the SEC, which of course is what the SEC wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we're going to see, Greg, now you're speaking the truth. Like, it may turn out that they get those four: UNC, UVA, Clemson, and Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking from that perspective because I don't think it's going to happen.
Yep.
Here's what I think is going to happen. It will be Florida State to the Big Ten, maybe Clemson, but who cares? It might be Florida State, Miami. But the main thing is that they get Florida State because they want games in Florida. When that happens, the SEC is finished with ESPN. The whole point, Greg, of doing business with them was to get all of these schools into the SEC. And once again, I keep coming back to this because it's a pertinent piece of information. FSU and Clemson was set to go into the SEC.
Yeah.
Back before Notre Dame came to the ACC. And ESPN is the one that pulled the plug on that. And so if it turns out that we see FSU go to the Big Ten, they may not realize it yet, Greg, but the SEC will be done with ESPN. That is not what they wanted. They did not want the Big Ten getting schools that they care about in the Southeast region.
Okay, let me flip the coin. Let me just come in from a different angle.
Okay.
Okay. And this goes out to everybody in the chat and everybody who planning on giving us a call tonight. What if we wake up, a settlement has been reached, and PATC is just dead wrong. I come up here, take the big L, and the story is, Tristan, that the Big Ten rushed on in. Florida State and Clemson, they took a first party talk, but they also took a first party talk with the SEC, and bam, 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 bam. Florida State and Clemson to the SEC, and then North Carolina and Virginia become available, and they go to the Big Ten.
That could happen.
Okay, now what was that?
That could happen.
Okay, now let me ask you this. Let's say all that happened. What do you think is the response the reaction from the SEC presidents that they gained Florida State and Clemson. I'm talking about the SEC presidents, not talking about ESPN right now. And they lost North Carolina and Virginia to the Big Ten.
Well, that's a great question, and here's what I think they should do. Okay? Let's just say that happens. The first order of business for the SEC should be, let's go get NC State and Virginia Tech. Okay? And my logic for saying that is there's a very real possibility that there could still be growth for those brands. I know they're not worth a whole lot right now. In a lot of people's minds, they probably aren't even going to be in the P2.
Mm-hmm.
But Greg, I'll call it the Texas A&M effect. Okay? Anyone who's really telling you the truth understands that one of the main drivers for Texas to go ahead and sign up with the SEC was the fact that Texas A&M was gaining advantages, especially recruiting advantages.
Absolutely. Exposure advantage. Absolutely.
Exposure, yeah, absolutely. So what I'm saying is that they should pursue Virginia Tech and NC State, and with the idea of, we can't ignore these states. We still have to grow. Like you were saying before, they need new territory, right? So they should go ahead and get those two schools and then just turn the thumb screws on Virginia and UNC and see if they can grow those other two in-state rivals to be bigger brands than them. Now, they may not be able to, but then again, maybe they can. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't ignore the states. Those two states should not be ignored by the SEC. And I feel like, that was a great hypothetical, Greg.
Yeah.
But I really feel like FSU is probably headed to the Big Ten, just based on everything we're hearing. And people don't realize it, but the SEC knows that they were very close to joining the SEC. Mm-hmm. And they are going to hold it against ESPN. Think about how it was with CBS when the SEC did not get their pro rata increase for Texas A&M and Missouri. They didn't like it. They didn't say a whole lot at the time. But then when the bid came back up for the next contract, they weren't even under consideration. Mm-hmm. The same thing is going to happen to ESPN, Greg. They're going to hold it against them. You wait and see.
You got it. All right, man. Beautiful call. I appreciate your time, Tristan. Call again. You've given us a lot to think about. Holy smokes. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Keep up the good work.
Buddy. Thank you.
All right.
Great
bye-bye.
Call. Great call. Tristan with another fantastic call.
Call from
Auburn.
Auburn Tiger is on the line. Thanks for calling again, sir. The floor is yours.
Hey, Greg, another great show, man.
Thank you.
You always do a great job, and I love hearing the callers. You just do a first-class act. Enjoy it all.
Appreciate it.
I don't know what's been discussed or what not's been discussed. I just not too long just got in, but I wanted to say this. Like I said, I'm about 60% on board with what you've been saying. I mean, you haven't been wrong for the most part. And listen, even though my mind is telling me one thing, my heart's telling me something else.
You're 60%. You're 60% on board, which is a higher percentage than the little general. My wife of 22 years is on board, so I appreciate that, sir.
I love that. Listen, I honestly believe you got three things going on here. You got Fox and Big Ten together. Then there's the SEC piece, and then there's the ESPN piece. I honestly believe from a financial point of view, the SEC knows that Clemson and Florida State would be a tremendous add, but like you're saying, their heart is really set on North Carolina and what's going to happen with them, and they're going to cater to them. They're going to do everything they want to do, knowing that Florida State and Clemson is there.
Yeah.
I believe ESPN really wants Florida State and Clemson. They don't want them there. So I believe SEC is kind of waiting this out to see how strongly ESPN wants them. And I believe if you get a Florida State Clemson to the SEC, it's only because ESPN is paying the freight.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not gonna lock up their four pro rata situations with Clemson and Florida State when they're trying to get North Carolina. And I believe that SEC is really in the catbird to get it all, depending on ESPN. If ESPN wants Florida State so bad, Clemson so bad, that they're going to pay the freight, they're going to match or do anything beyond the Big Ten. I'll be honest with you, it wouldn't surprise me if the Big Ten has offered Florida State not even the full share. That's just what I believe. But if ESPN offers that, SEC would take Florida State and Clemson, knowing that they're still guaranteed those four slots to get North Carolina and whoever they want to come with them. How does that sound to you?
Well, I think it's all possible. Like I said earlier in the show, I think there's a higher percentage chance, not over 50%, whatever, but there's a higher percent chance that the SEC eats four times. The SEC grabs North Carolina, Virginia, Florida State, and Clemson, then there is the chance of the Big Ten grabbing North Carolina. I really, from everything, Big Ten just is not going to be able to get their top target of North Carolina. They're going to try to get what they need. And this is largely dependent on what the SEC, ESPN appetite is. Right? Mm-hmm. Largely dependent on that appetite. Right now, though, as we sit here, Sunday, June 2nd, 2024, based upon a few different ways of looking at it, seeing it, hearing it, tasting it, smelling it, the kinetic energy ain't there. We're being told the SEC would rather just take those big new demographic areas for so many different reasons. They really don't want Florida State and Clemson. They might have to take them.
Yeah, they might have to.
They might have to, but they don't. They're looking at something else. Their presidents are looking at something else. But what you're saying is not out of bounds. No question about it, Mr. Auburn Tiger. You might be on to something, or you're on something.
And Greg, I think what you're saying, I think about everybody agrees with. I believe North Carolina and Virginia are all locked up with the SEC. I think that is a foregone conclusion, which is why I believe the SEC is in the catbird seat. And they're looking at ESPN, reading the temperature. Florida State and Clemson ain't left yet. Mm-hmm. They know it's getting close. And they're going to look at ESPN. And if ESPN is determined to keep the Big Ten out of Tallahassee, like the Florida State Money Perch said, the ESPN would do everything possible. And I believe that the SEC will say, okay, this is all on you, ESPN. If you want them, you pay the freight. Don't count this according to our plans to move North Carolina and Virginia. And I believe they're going to end up with more pieces on the puzzle. And wouldn't that be a masterful job of the SEC and Greg Sankey to coordinate this in such a way that they get more than they bargained for? That would be really something.
Yeah, that would be something. No question about it. That would be massive. And they might
and according
have
to what you're saying.
Yep, go ahead.
I said, according to what you're saying, because you kind of, to me, you gravitating back to where we were in November, slightly, saying that SEC eating first, second, third, and fourth. That's still a strong possibility. And I believe
I will phrase it this way. It's a possibility. But, Mr. Auburn Tiger, the kinetic energy on the ground right now does not say that. It actually is. SEC's not interested. Not interested.
And I believe that.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that they're not as interested.
Maybe it
but
changes.
ESPN, I believe, is.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some wiggle room in there. But once again, Greg, I know you got other callers.
Great
job. Appreciate you, all that you do.
Appreciate it, Mr. Auburn Tiger. Call again, sir.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Call from
OS Beaver.
I'm sorry, I did not get the name.
OS Beaver.
OS Beaver, thanks for calling, sir. I appreciate it. Can you hold on 1 second? I have done PNW Youth a disservice. He put a super chat in a while ago, and I failed to post it. I apologize, PNW
No problem.
Youth. Secret Big 12 fan Nick Jager agrees with you. I'm not sure what you agreed with me on because you put it up, and I apologize for not posting it. My bad. I'm glad you are a secret Mick Jagger fan, and I'm glad you do agree with me on something. I do appreciate it. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for helping us keep the lights on here in the studios. OS Beaver, thanks for calling. I do appreciate it. The floor is yours. Let it rip.
Yeah, I was kind of wanted to get your thoughts on if the SEC was perhaps successful in getting Florida State and Clemson, and they're up to 18, the same as the Big Ten. Is there a chance that it could stop there for like a while, say maybe 4 years or 5 years, and the ACC survives with North Carolina because then they can keep their friends with Duke and NC State, but essentially, potentially, you could have the Big 12 also add to pick up Oregon State and Washington State, and then the ACC with Notre Dame still, having some decent quality football with Miami and Notre Dame, North Carolina, still in the ACC. They add two of USF and Tulane, and all four at 18 for a few years or so. Or do you just think at that point the offer from the Big Ten for North Carolina and Virginia would just be too good that North Carolina just could not stay, and they'd be off to either the Big Ten or SEC in short order?
Well, let me throw a different scenario at you, but it gets to the place of where you want to take it. Let's say we're going to go with your scenario where the SEC takes Florida State and Clemson because that's what ESPN wants, right? They do it. And let's say North Carolina's in this quagmire. They remain in that quagmire. The Board of Governors is not letting them move. They can't move. At that point, I still truly believe, OS Beaver, that the Big Ten does something. They are, and I say this, they're not going to walk away from the ACC implosion with nothing. Now, what would that be? Miami and something else? I don't know, man. You bring up a very interesting scenario in which ESPN really want, they're going to play defense. They take Florida State and Clemson and North Carolina gets in a quagmire. I still think the SEC is going to do all. I think the SEC is going to be successful in getting North Carolina. But ultimately, you're leading to the question of Washington State and Oregon State to the ACC. I think that has absolute potential. And I am, as you probably know, or maybe not, but I am not a believer at all. Never been. We were told it ain't happening. Not a believer in Oregon State and Washington State to the Big 12. Never have. I've said that from the very beginning. We were told that it's not happening. But the ACC scenario is in play. And I think whatever Washington State and Oregon State does in building their Frankenstein new Pac-8, Pac-10 conference, they're going to build an exit hatch because of the ACC. Because if that implosion happens, and we think it's going to happen, in whatever scenario you want to speak of, I believe there's going to be more than 2 teams leaving. In that, there's going to be 2 leaving pretty quickly. There's going to be at least 2 more leaving somewhere down the road, but there's going to be a lot of work they're going to have to do, right? Unless they get started.
I think
now.
that ACC could be okay, but as long as, only as if the ACC only lost a couple of more, like a North Carolina and a Notre Dame, but you still need somebody quality like Miami or Notre Dame.
Yeah.
NC State and Virginia Tech are pretty good, but you need some quality that is enough attractive for like the travel, and then like a Western pair with Cal and Stanford could be okay. But I kind of like what the earlier caller said of if the SEC struck first, took Florida State and Clemson, I feel like North Carolina is still going to listen, right? They're still going to listen to both the Big Ten and the SEC. So I think the SEC could throw out that threat. Well, if you go to the Big Ten or if you don't take our offer, we're taking NC State and Virginia Tech to still get into North Carolina and Virginia. That could, be a little bit of a consideration for North Carolina on, which conference is really best for them. And I still think like you, I think that they slightly prefer SEC as of right now. And the SEC might, have a way to increase their odds there a little bit and get all 3 of the top 3 picks, which are probably Florida State, Clemson, and North Carolina, and then, then they could add one and Virginia potentially to get into that market. And that's a pretty good quad of teams for the SEC, and that would probably leave the Big Ten to look at a Miami and a Georgia Tech or something.
Yeah, I all that is interesting. OS Beaver. The one pushback I would put forward is there's not going to be any of this. The SEC is not going to be able to threaten North Carolina by saying we're going to take North Carolina State if you don't, because North Carolina State is in the same boat as North Carolina. They're in the same quagmire. The Board of Governors, the state system, the 24-member. If the SEC can't get North Carolina, they're not going to be able to get North Carolina State. In other words, the Board of Governors is going to be looking at the interest of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and North Carolina State. So
right now, but I just saw like a 56-team model, which actually included North Carolina and Duke. Right? It's a hypothetical, and it's several teams from the Big 12 are eventually called up into these teams as well, and I could see that. And that's one reason why, even if the ACC loses 4 or something teams, is it really worth moving to the Big 12, or can you build something that's very close and then you're still in that same position basically where you just try to make yourself attractive for call-up? I don't know if you really get much of an edge by joining the Big 12 if you're a Pitt, a Louisville, possibly NC State or Virginia Tech, even if you lose 4 of the best teams out of the ACC. You might if you lose a couple more, but I think at that point you could potentially hold the line, and then you could have some of your other interests like higher academic standards and, potentially a little more influence and other things that you like. But, and North Carolina has to go somewhere. It doesn't mean that the Wolfpack backpack is for sure going to follow them just because they're kind of tied right now and they want to do that. Eventually, those hands could be forced. I mean, that would not completely surprise me because you have Duke and North Carolina State who are both trying to be, a backpack on North Carolina right now.
Yeah. All right, man. I appreciate the call. Beautiful call, OS Beaver. Please call again, sir.
Thanks, Greg.
You got it.
Have a good one.
Beautiful.
Yep.
PNW Mick says you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime. Okay. Thank you, PNW. I appreciate Super Chat. Appreciate your generosity once again, sir. And I do apologize I didn't get to the first one earlier.
Call from
Ryan Thomas.
Ryan Thomas. Uh-oh. I'm a little scared of this call.
Well, I wouldn't be.
I'm a little scared of this call because I was afraid. We did our big story of the night was the Big 12.
Yep.
Possibly looking at private capital as a conference-wide, not an individual school, well, that too, but a conference-wide, and I knew Ryan Thomas was going to call in and say, Greg, the fat guy from Minnesota, you're crazy to even talk about this. You're crazy to even bring it up as a potentiality. You're crazy, Greg. Your cheese have slipped off your cracker. Private capital has no business being in the Big 12. The floor is yours, Ryan Thomas.
Well, I mean, I feel like getting on your show tonight, it's like trying to get on the runway at MSP trying to take off during a January snowstorm. It's pretty crowded to get on the show tonight. But I want to go back and say this. So a couple things. I want to talk about the private equity element of this, or the private capital, whatever you want to call about it. So by way of background, Greg, I deal with the U.S. tax laws as they relate to companies and businesses and investors' international activities. So I work a lot with private investment. I work a lot with the private equity, private capital, venture capitalist funds. I work with a lot of people. So this is a space that I see every day at work. And, it's an interesting area. And I think, first of all, before anything happens with conferences, we have to see what rolls out legislatively from the House settlement. Because without any employee exemptions or special, employee status exemptions, without any congressional action on how, the status of college athletes, and without any congressional action on how does Title IX play into all of this, right?
But we might not get that for a while.
So let me continue on this.
Go ahead.
One of the things, what I've said this before, without any congressional action, this thing has the potential to devolve into complete chaos, meaning that, if the legal regulation and the implication becomes too much of a headache for the schools, like I've said this before, that's where you have the real legitimate nightmare that would ruin college sports of basically having football being broken off from the conferences and becoming club amateur sports where they just basically pay the university check for using their trademarks. And, then you have ESPN and private capital and everything coming in and basically running these massive, ugly super leagues. That's a doomsday scenario. That will happen without any congressional action, Greg. So if congressional action happens, I'm going to tell you exactly why Brett Yormark is going to bring in private capital to the Big 12. The reason why is because this period from essentially 2024 to 2031 is the Big 12 gamble period. Brett Yormark is going to do everything he can to position the Big 12 to market the Big 12 in a way that come 2031, it's going to be more enticing of a TV product. That means you're going to see more Big 12 games late at night on Saturday when the SEC and the Big 10 kind of are no longer, kind of when that action is done. You're going to see more weekday games of the Big 12, like on a Thursday or perhaps a Wednesday or something like that, or a Friday. You're going to see more stuff like that, and essentially that's kind of what Brett Yormark is going to try to do. He's going to try to market the league in a way to increase its TV value for the next deal coming up in 2031. To close the gap, to help the universities be competitive so they can have the resources to put more teams into the college football playoff, to increase the percentage of the CFP revenue when the look-in provision comes in 2027, to improve the position for the conference when the CFP negotiation comes up again in the 2030s altogether. These schools are going to need mass amounts of cash to close the financial revenue gap with the SEC and the Big Ten. And this is the gamble of why, this is probably why he would bring this in. It's because the schools are going to need the resources to handle not only the NIL and the payroll challenges, but also, in essence, to be competitive with those other two leagues to keep relevant. So really, every element of what Yormark is trying to do here is to try to position the league to jump back in, to eventually close the revenue gap to a somewhat decent way as possible. And right now, private capital investment would be a way to kind of serve as a bridge loan or a bridge gap between now and then. So that I think is the big gamble for the Big 12. And it may or may not pay off. It may or may not pay off. It could be miserable, but that's kind of, what other choice do you have being in that position? So I don't think it's a crazy idea at all, Greg. I think that what would happen is the mass amounts of capital would probably come into the Big 12 itself. Perhaps if there's an employee status, if there isn't, if the conference ends up employing the athletes, maybe they use that money to kind of help be competitive in that area, and in return, maybe the private capital investors better get a percentage of, any of the gambling stuff that the Big 12 is doing, or any of the, conference revenues. Who knows? Who knows, Greg? But I think I certainly understand the rationale of why he would do that, and I don't think it's crazy whatsoever.
Wow. I thought you were going to come on here, and I thought you were going to chew me out.
No, but I don't think, but how, if you put yourself in the position of those 16 institutions,
yeah.
Now all of them want to eventually be at the P2 level. Okay, there's two ways to get there. You can either fight each other for one of the few spots that may or may not be there for you in the Big Ten or the SEC. And to be honest, the Big Ten long-term interest, I don't know what they're going to do. If Notre Dame becomes available, believe me, there is a Notre Dame backpack, Greg. There is a Notre Dame backpack that includes schools like Stanford and Duke and things like that, okay? So it depends on what happens there. And is the SEC ever going to go westward? And that doesn't seem likely right now. West meaning, I'm talking like Mountain Time Zone and Pacific Time Zone. And that, I don't see that right now. Now, anything can happen because the world changes all the time. Next thing we know, we can wake up and find out the SEC is targeting Arizona State or Arizona or BYU or Utah, whatever. Who knows? Okay, I'm not saying it's happening. But the other option, the most realistic option, is to try to raise yourself as a conference as a whole up to that level. And how do you do that? You got to find ways to increase your value of your product, your TV product. And that means fitting in niches that your competitor doesn't. So, for example, SEC and Big Ten, Alabama and Ohio State and Michigan are not going to play 10 p.m. Eastern games, Greg. They're never going to play those. Never.
Yep.
And you're going to have opportunities. Those schools are not going to want. They're very hesitant, and I know that you're going to see this. I know Fox is trying to force them to play some some Friday night games on with the Big Ten, and we'll see how well Ohio State cooperates with that, and Michigan cooperate with that. But ultimately, what you try to do is you try to have a parity of the league. You try to parity in the league, basically, and basically you try to market yourself in a way and fill niches that the other two are not, and create value there. And if you can do that, and if you can have success, and you can get the funds to get the players and have the resources you need to be competitive to where you can put 3 or 4 teams in the college football playoff, you increase your value as a whole as a league from not only that eventual CFP revenue distribution with the look-in and the next contract, but also for your future television contracts. So this totally makes sense, because if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to be competitive. And I think that this is really this is very on brand with Yormark. And to be honest with you, I don't think the league or the schools in it have much of a choice. And I think that that's what they have to do.
Do you have time for a question?
Sure. Go ahead, Greg.
Let's say the Big 12 pulls the trigger, and you make a great comment about how Big 12 might have to wait because they want a resolution on the Title IX application, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say all that happens and the Big 12 pulls the trigger. And let's just throw in the AAC. Let's say the new commissioner, whatever. They do it on a smaller scale, right? But they do it than the Big 12. Now, does the ACC, do they do it? Because if they don't do it, right?
Yeah.
If they don't have that infusion of cash for the next 5-6 years, like everything you've just said, all the reasons why you'd want to do it. And if the ACC can't get together, can't decide if their individual schools do it, that's going to set them behind, I think. It's a prisoner dilemma. Do you think the ACC pulls the trigger?
I think that they should, but the bigger question is right now, Greg, is the ACC has some bigger things on its plate right now. and I totally think they will. I mean, I think they would, but right now the league has to decide: do we settle, or do we take this, or do we die on this? Yeah. And I mean, and if they settle and they get some cash money, that infusion, do the universities feel like they need to go out and get private equity if they have that cash infusion? Maybe they still do, maybe they don't.
Yeah.
And then you have the really big reality of, if Notre Dame wants to sort of shape the ACC into something that it wants it to be, you might have 1 or 2 members. I could see like a Louisville or, a Syracuse being told, well, thanks for coming, but we don't see you as part of our future. Who knows? I mean, but I think right now the ACC, I don't think there's a lot of unity right now as far as what they want to do with whether or not to settle or not. I don't know if there's a lot of unity right now within the ACC as far as, what it comprises moving forward. Now, certainly, if that gets settled down the road, it becomes a wise option for them to do it. I think the advantage that the Big 12 has over the ACC is the Big 12 has been through that valley of death previously, and they survived it, and they're going to be somewhat a little bit more intact moving forward, so they might have a 1 or 2 year advantage on them. But, I mean, I wouldn't see why you wouldn't do it as the ACC. Mm-hmm. But right now the ACC has to get a lot of things in order for itself. And eventually, could the Big Ten and the SEC do it? Absolutely. Yeah. But you can't calculate. I mean, they might do it regardless of whether or not you do it anyway. So the question is you got to move forward and do everything you can and hope and pray that you can close that gap. And I hope that, for the sake of college football, I think we need to have, we can't have 2 leagues that are based on kind of exclusive membership criteria control the overall future of college sports when you have a gigantic population growth out in sort of the mountain states area, places like Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Idaho, where you have pretty big population trends starting to grow, and a lot of money's going into there. I think that there needs to be some more competitive options, and there's markets there. So, hopefully, whoever's the smartest that picks up on this will do that. Now, I'm going to be very honest, and I've told you this before, and I think Jim Phillips is not very bright. I've said this to you for 3 years or 2 years, however long the show's been on. I've told you ever since the day of this show started that I don't think he's very smart at all. I don't think he's very bright, because I mean that from the sense that he's so stuck in the old ways. I don't think he knows how to brand or market his conference or position his conference. I don't think he has that instinct. I don't think he has the innovative instinct. I think he's a stuffy administrator, and I think he's completely botched in how he's handled everything here with FSU and Clemson. And I think he's just as inept as George Kliavkoff, and we're going to see that. The guy, the thing that I'm so glad, because the way Phillips handled the CFP expansion only vindicates everything I just said, Greg. Just what he did basically screwed it for everybody but the SEC and the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. And, so I think ultimately the ACC needs some innovative thought. They need a commissioner that can see past the stuffy administrative academic department and university side of it, that can actually see the marketing side of it and can see the future and can sort of see the interplay with culture and with media. And, there's a reason why the Big Ten hired Tony Petitti. There's a reason why they went after a media guy. There's a reason why the Big Ten went after Bevilacqua. There's a Notre Dame, went after Bevilacqua. There's a reason why there's that shift, Greg. It's because most of those university presidents realize that. And with the ACC, they got a lot of stuffy presidents, Greg. They got a lot of stuffy presidents, and they need to have a paradigm shift. And maybe being on death's line here, on their deathbed here in a coma with, potential implosion, maybe that will wake some of them up to consider innovation. But they've got to, because if they don't, they'll die.
Got it. Beautiful.
Anyway,
man.
Thanks so much, Greg. Take care, everyone.
Great call.
All right,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ryan Thomas. Beautiful. Wow, Ryan Thomas surprised me. I thought he was going to chew me out for having this program Sunday night, talking about the Big 12 potentially going in on a conference-wide private capital type of situation, type of plan. It sounds like they're going to. But I thought Ryan Thomas was gonna rip me for talking about it. He was gonna rip Brett Yormark, but Ryan Thomas thinks, he can understand. Look, the situation. This is a 5-6 year window where the Big 12 is going to gamble on themselves. They're going to bet on themselves, and it looks like this might be happening. Opie, holy smokes! While walking around the Holy Smokes Theater, I was inspecting the drapes and smelling the fabric. Okay. I can see the cleaning has gone well, but much to my surprise, walking by the concession stand, I see on the menu, it says only cheeseburgers and Pepsi. Just no burger without the cheese. It only says cheeseburger and Pepsi. Well, I look, there's going to be quick, sudden change in the Holy Smokes Theater. That is going to change. There's not going to be cheese on the burger. There's not going to be cheese on the burger. the burgers that you get in the Holy Smokes Theater are going to be real burgers. The burgers that were intended to be eaten. You don't put cheese on beautiful steak. You don't put cheese on a beautiful fish fillet. You don't put cheese anywhere on a great piece of meat, on a great bratwurst, on a great hot dog. Cheese doesn't belong anywhere when it comes to meat. The burgers at the Holy Smokes Theater is going to have grilled onions, grilled mushrooms, beautiful seasoning, maybe for some of you a little bit of barbecue sauce. Lots of things you can do with the burger. But you don't put a piece of cheese to dilute the great flavor that you can have and grow and preserve and extend. And a hamburger. A hamburger is a people trash the hamburger. Great, the hamburger. It's a low level of meat. Of course you got to throw a bunch of cheese on it. No, you don't. No, you don't. The next time, wait. I want to say something. The next time, you heathens in the chat room, the next time you go to somebody's house, the next time you eat a burger, I mean a burger, have the toppings on there, lettuce, tomato, bacon, grilled onion, whatever you're going to do with that burger. The next time you have a hamburger and it doesn't have cheese on it, go ahead, taste the burger, and ask yourself, could this burger be possibly improved with a slice of melted cheese? You're going to be surprised at the answer. If you look truly in your heart, push out the cheesification conspiracy that's been happening, this grand conspiracy. Push it away, and you're gonna be surprised at the answer. You're gonna say no. I wouldn't want a slice of melted cheese on this beautiful burger that I'm eating. Give yourself a chance. Say no to the cheese. Say no to the cheeseburger. And Pepsi. Pepsi is the great knockoff of Coke. The great knockoff of Coke. You gotta go with Coke, no Pepsi. Thank you, Opie, for letting me know what's going on inside the Holy Smokes Theater. Thank you for your inspection once again. We're going to make major changes. It's going to happen quickly. The cheese is gone. There can be some cheese sauce. Hey, wait. You can have cheese. Look, a great way to have French fries. How we're going to serve French fries in the Holy Smokes Theater is with a wedge of lemon. You squeeze the wedge of lemon onto your French fries, yes. And then take those French fries and dip it in to a melted cheese, and it's absolutely beautiful. That's how we eat French fries at the Holy Smokes Theater. I'm just trying to elevate all you guys' palates because, my goodness, you need it. Opie, thank you so much for your incredible generosity once again. Helping us keep the lights on here. Thank you so much for your incredible generosity, your unbelievable friendship, and your creativeness, your creative writing. You know I love that. Everybody knows I love it. I love all the comments. I love all the super chats. But when you get creative, beautiful. Thank you so much, Opie. Thank you so very much. Yeah, Culver's. You get that, you can ask for that creamy cheese. Not on the meat, for the French fries. And spread that lemon on those fries. Kevin Hampton. You're 0 for 3, Kevin Hampton. You're 0 for 3. It's remarkable, but you are. Hold the Onions made it 0 for 3. But thank you for the comment, Kevin. I appreciate it. Pepper jack cheese on burgers for me? You're out of your mind. Ryan Thomas, Greg asked me a question, so I answered. You did a great job, Mr. Ryan Thomas. It was a great phone call. No question about it. Hamburger helper for me, Greg. You meat snob. Oh, you guys are killing me. You're absolutely killing me. Unbelievable. Each and one of you are killing me. Has any of you, Daniel, Matt, Black Ignis, and Blue Cheese, oh my gosh. Has any one of you at all, at least been somewhat receptive to the idea that maybe I should just try a burger without putting the cheese on it? Maybe some of you, maybe all of you haven't even had a burger in a long time without the cheese. Just try it once. Just try it once. Opie, I see now that the Holy Smokes Theater is sponsored by the Wisconsin Cheese Association now. Well, that sponsorship is out the door. I don't care how much money the Wisconsin Cheese Association is spending on signage inside and outside the Holy Smokes Theater. That contract is being ripped up. That contract is being ripped up. That grant of rights is being ripped up. Opie, thank you so much for your incredible generosity once again. Holy smokes. Thank you very much, sir. I do appreciate it. The Evil Badger, Ryan Willie, Greg, I'll agree cheddar wursts, oh gosh, are gross. But on a nice juicy bacon cheeseburger, it is a must-have. Do yourself a favor, Evil Badger, Ryan Willie. Just the next time you have a burger, leave the cheese off. Make sure and this is another problem. People don't season their burger enough. You don't season it enough. You don't put enough. And so because you don't season your burger enough, you have to put the cheese on it to get the salt on the burger. No! Put a double seasoning on your burger. Go to the store and get a double seasoning. I'm telling you, man, the burger is not being respected. The hamburger, the meat of the burger is not being respected. You've season it. Put grilled onions on it. Put the mushrooms on it. Put the pickle on it. Get some brine on there. Put a slice of tomato. Have the juices running with the tomato, with the lettuce, with the crisp lettuce. Put barbecue sauce on it. Put a little mustard on it. If you want to put ketchup on it, go ahead. Keep the cheese off it. Give it a try. Give it a try. Thank you so much for your super chat, Ryan Willie. I do appreciate it so very much. Clinton Moses. I may have one person who agrees with me. Cajun seasoning. Season it up. There's so many burgers out there that nobody does anything with. So they put it. I need a piece of cheese on it. Yeah, a lot of people are anti-tomato. Chicken patty with Swiss cheese and ham. There is only, and I'm gonna end it with this. There's really only two exceptions to the rule that I will even contemplate. And I've talked about this before. Parmesan, chicken Parmesan. The Parmesan doesn't, it sort of can elevate the chicken. I'll eat a little bit of it, whatever. Chicken Parmesan, it can barely pass. And the other one, when you're talking about Swiss cheese, turkey and Swiss cheese, it kind of works. You know, the turkey doesn't have a big flavor at all. It kind of is okay. Kind of. But everything else is a complete no right now, as far as I know. Chicken Parmesan can work. Chicken is not beef. I'm talking about meat, brother Manzo. Don't put cheese on a fish. Don't put cheese on shrimp. Don't put cheese on lobster. Don't put cheese on a hot dog. Don't put cheese anywhere with the meat. Okay, you guys are all tired of me. There's no question about it. You guys are all tired of me. Daniel Montecastle talking about Velveeta cheese in and around a burger. Daniel Montecastle, Mr. Hoosier, he's all excited about Signetti, and he should be all excited. But Dan Montecastle, his cheese has totally slipped off his cracker. And I can say this because he's a long, dear friend of mine. Daniel, the next burger you have, keep the cheese off. Keep the cheese off. Greg has lost his mind. Well, no question about that. No question about that. Ryan Willie, I'm a cheesehead, Greg. Well, yes, you are. Yes, you are. I understand that. I don't think I missed any of these. Okay, so anyways, we're going to close it up. We've been on the air for almost 3 hours on a Sunday evening. Holy smokes. We're 3 minutes away from being on the air for 3 hours. I want to thank everybody who's come on in, the generous donations. Thank you so much for helping us get off to a good start in the month of June. I appreciate it. The comments, the phone calls, holy smokes. This week, look, we had a crazy May. This June, we're going to get more into the predictions now. We're going to be talking about rosters. We're going to be lining these teams up. I'm going to give you my PATC predictions. You guys are going to go crazy. You're going to say Greg the Cooler. I know I'm going to fall into a trap in the ACC predictions. I know I'm going to do brutal in the Big 12. The Big 10 and the SEC are going to be easier this year. Top teams in the A and the G5. We've already done that. We did our top 5 for the G5. We've already done that here at Peek Around the Corner. In the month of June, we're going to be talking about these conference races without divisions. It's going to be wild. It's going to be crazy. Unbalanced schedules. New rivalries are going to be picking up. Old rivalries are going to be leaving where they've left it. The Gophers are going to get the axe back. Holy smokes. Anyways, I want to thank you all for joining us. We're going to be going live tomorrow. I don't know when, because we go where the story goes. So keep your head on a swivel. If you're new to the channel, or if you haven't done so yet, please hit the subscribe button, subscribe to our channel, and open up your notifications. Because we're going to be coming on live. We don't know when. If a story breaks tomorrow morning, we're going to be coming on live. We're going to be covering it like nobody's business. So please, keep your head on a swivel. Buckle up. Brace for impact. College football's Peek Around the Corner. Until next time, from all of us at PATC ATC. To all of you, please, you all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.